Welcome back to Redstone with Dave.
And Baker, hello.
Hello, Baker. It's been a minute. What are we doing today?
Today is sort of going to be a mixture of very easy and complicated things because we're doing redstone inputs. So the things that you can place, press, sit on, etc. to trigger redstone
Cool.
for all of the other things, like your piston door. All right. So
Wooden versus
there
stone.
these I would say are probably the three most basic, easiest to understand redstone inputs after the lever.
Okay.
I don't have a lever here because I assume you know what a lever does.
Yes.
Okay, we're good. So, wooden pressure plates, stone pressure plates, wooden button, stone button. So, the wooden stuff is basically just weaker, is sort of how I remember it, because wood is not as strong as stone. The gist of it is that both of these will trigger when I step on them, and both of these will trigger when I press them.
Okay.
One of the interesting things is that the stone button holds for 1 second, 10 redstone ticks, 20 in-game ticks. And then the wooden button holds for 1.5 seconds, so slightly longer. So if I press these really quickly, or if I press, or if you stop for a second, and I press those really quickly, or not quite fast enough, there we go. So you saw that even though I pressed this one first, they turned off at about the same time.
Yeah.
So that's because the wooden button lasts for slightly longer.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the wooden button is 1.5 seconds, stone button is 1 second. So a lot of times people will build contraptions specifically built for one or the other. So just be careful of that if you're following a tutorial. And then one of the other things is that wooden pressure plates can be activated by things that aren't players. So
Oh, wow.
if I put that block there, well, it's not quite on the middle. There we go. So now it's on the middle, and that is triggering the wooden pressure plate because that entity is. Similarly, I can shoot it with an arrow, and it turns on, right?
Wow.
Because that arrow is in there, and the wooden pressure plate senses the arrow. Conversely,
The stone plate,
I have
not
bad
having
aim.
it.
I have very bad aim, but it doesn't happen with the stone because the stone is strong, raw, and won't be submitted by simple arrows or items. And in addition, wooden pressure plates aren't triggered by arrows, or wooden buttons are, and stone buttons are not triggered by arrows.
Okay.
So you can actually create sort of targeting ranges where you want to be able to hit those buttons. That's a nice shot. I
That
compliment
was.
myself. Yeah,
Well
thank you.
done.
Just as a quick explanation of game ticks, we'll go over to this thing all the way over here because I'm very organized and built things in the correct order that we should go over them. So this is a quick example. So game ticks, which is the amount of times the game can render block changes, is 20 times a second. But a redstone tick, so like one redstone repeater delay, so just one delay here of this repeater, so it's not an extra delay, is one redstone tick. And one redstone tick is technically two in-game ticks. So this is 0.1 seconds. So that is 1 second.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this you'd think would be triggering 10 times a second, but it's actually a couple of different states. So this is actually, the redstone is only turning on 5 times a second, and it's turning off 5 times a second. So if it's just on, it's technically on for 10 ticks out of every second. Toggle it because it has to have an on and an off state,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So this is basically the fastest clock that you can get because in 1 second it has 5 off and 5 on. And this little contraption is a spaz clock. So if you try to break this redstone block, you notice you can't really do it.
Yeah.
And that's because these two command blocks are set up in such a way that the one on the top triggers after the one on the bottom. And basically, what this one does is it sets this block as stone,
Mm-hmm.
and then this one sets it as a redstone block again.
Oh, okay.
So the sort of trick here is because the game can only run things 20 times a second, this setting it to stone, you never see it being set to stone because it gets set to redstone block immediately after. So what happens is redstone block is placed here, and then and then both of these are triggered, right? But
Yeah.
because the one on the bottom triggers first, it sets it to stone, and then this one sets it to redstone block. But that's all in one tick, so you can't see it. It's not visual. And then when it updates, these command blocks get powered again, and this one sets it to stone, and this one sets it to redstone block again. And the reason you can't just do it with the one is because if you constantly set it to a redstone block, that doesn't actually change the block state. So these command blocks are never unpowered. But by setting it to stone, they become unpowered, and then when the redstone block is set again, they get powered.
Gotcha.
So basically, this command block, which is going to say 20 TPS, is triggering 20 times a second.
Okay.
And this one is triggering 5 times a second. So if I flick both of these levers, and then I turn them off again, and you look in here, and you look in chat, you'll see that for every 4 20 ticks per second, there's 1 5 ticks per second.
Okay.
If you hit T and look in chat.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you just like scroll up, so the one on the bottom is a little bit delayed because that's how long it took me to turn the stuff off.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But you can see that?
I do.
Yeah. So that's an explanation of redstone ticks versus. And then we'll go back.